What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly chat, only to be blindsided by a host who crosses every line imaginable? It only took one comment from Denise Welch to turn a promotional interview into the most explosive walkout in British television history. Liam Neeson arrived at the Loose Women studio that morning with nothing but good intentions. He was there to talk about his latest film, to share some stories, to connect with the audience. The kind of thing he'd done hundreds of times before. But within minutes of sitting down on that famous purple sofa, it became clear this was not going to be a normal interview. The panel that day consisted of Denise Welch, who was leading the conversation, along with Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Janet Street Porter. The audience was packed, the cameras were rolling, and Liam settled into his seat with that familiar warm smile he's known for. Denise started off pleasantly. "Enough. Liam, lovely to have you here. Now, you've got this new film coming out, and we're all very excited about it. But before we get to that, I just have to ask you something." Already, there was something in her tone, a sharpness, an edge that didn't quite match her smile. Liam nodded politely. "Of course, fire away. You've played a lot of tough guys, a lot of action heroes. Tell me, do you think that's because you're compensating for something? I mean, you're getting on a bit now, aren't you?" The other panelists shifted uncomfortably. Nadia's eyes widened slightly. Kay looked down at her notes. But Denise just sat there, that same tight smile on her face, waiting for an answer. Liam laughed it off, though you could see the surprise in his eyes. "Well, I wouldn't say I'm compensating for anything. I just enjoy the roles. They're fun to play, and audiences seem to enjoy watching them. But don't you think it's a bit silly?" Denise pressed on. "A man your age running sides around, pretending to be some kind of superhero? I mean, when do you think you'll retire and let the younger lads have a go?" Janet Street Porter jumped in, trying to steer things back. "I think what Denise means is that you've had such a varied career, Liam. You've done everything from Schindler's List to action films. That range is incredible." "Thank you, Janet," Liam said, clearly grateful for the lifeline. "Yes, I've been very fortunate to play many different types of characters over the years." But Denise wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice taking on an even more pointed tone. "Let's talk about your personal life for a moment. You've been widowed for some time now. Have you thought about dating again? Or are you just too old for all that?" The studio went silent, completely silent. You could hear the audience collectively hold their breath. Nadia put her hand to her mouth. Kay's jaw dropped. Even Janet, who was known for her blunt statements, looked shocked. Liam's expression changed. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by something harder, more guarded. "I don't think that's an appropriate question, Denise." "Oh, come on," Denise said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We're all adults here. This is what we do on this show. We have real conversations. We don't just sit around promoting films like some other shows do. We get into the nitty-gritty of people's lives. There's a difference between having a real conversation and being disrespectful," Liam said quietly. But there was steel in his voice now. Nadia tried to intervene. "Liam, maybe we could talk about your preparation for the film? I heard you did a lot of your own stunts." "Yes, let's do that," Kay added quickly, flipping through her cards. "That sounds much more interesting." But Denise cut them both off. No, I want to finish this thought. Liam, you seem quite sensitive about this. Is it because you're lonely? Is that why you keep doing these action films? To feel young and virile again?" The audience gasped. Several people in the crowd could be heard muttering their disapproval. Liam sat very still, his hands clasped in front of him. "Denise, I came here to talk about my work," he said, his voice measured and calm, but you could hear the anger beneath it. "I didn't come here to be insulted or to have my personal grief turned into entertainment." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Denise said, rolling her eyes. "This is television. This is what people want to see. They don't want some boring, sanitized interview where everyone just says nice things. They want the truth." "The truth?" Liam repeated, and now his voice was rising slightly. "The truth is that you're being incredibly rude. The truth is that you've crossed several lines in the space of a few minutes. The truth is that this is the most unprofessional interview I've ever been a part of." Janet nodded in agreement. "He's got a point, Denise. You've been quite harsh." "Oh, don't you?" "Start," Denise snapped at Janet. "You're always going on about speaking your mind and being honest. Well, that's all I'm doing." "There's honest and then there's cruel," Janet shot back. "And you're being cruel." Denise turned back to Liam, her face flushed now, clearly irritated that she was losing control of the situation. I'm just asking questions that people at home are thinking. Don't shoot the messenger. No one at home is thinking these things, Kay interjected. Denise, seriously, you need to apologize. I'm not apologizing for doing my job, Denise said defiantly. Liam uncrossed his legs and leaned forward. Your job is to interview guests, not to attack them. Your job is to make people feel welcome, not to dredge up painful personal experiences for shock value. I'm not attacking you, Denise insisted. I'm just trying to have a real conversation. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. If this is your idea of a real conversation, Liam said, then I genuinely feel sorry for anyone who has to talk to you on a regular basis. The audience erupted in applause. Nadia was nodding vigorously. Kay said, "Here, here." Even Janet gave a small clap. Denise's face went even redder. How dare you? I've been doing this show for years. I've interviewed hundreds of people. I know what I'm doing. Then why are you behaving like this? Liam asked. What possessed you to think it was acceptable to talk to me or anyone this way? Because you celebrities think you're so special? Denise said, and now the mask was really slipping. You think you can just come on our show, plug your little films, and we're supposed to fawn all over you? Well, not on my watch. I treat everyone the same. I don't care how famous you are. Treating people the same doesn't mean treating them badly, Nadia said softly. Liam has been nothing but gracious, and you've been attacking him from the moment he sat down. I haven't been attacking him, Denise protested, but her voice was less certain now. Yes, you have, Kay said firmly, and I think you know it. You went after his age, his career choices, and then you brought up his late wife. That's beyond the pale, Denise. Liam stood up slowly, and the entire studio seemed to freeze. He carefully removed his microphone, taking his time, letting the silence build. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but everyone heard every word. I've been in this industry for over 4 decades, he said. I've done interviews all over the world. I've dealt with tough questions, challenging topics, difficult conversations, but I have never, in all that time, been spoken to with such callous disregard for basic human decency. Oh, please, Denise said. But her bravado was wavering now. Don't be so melodramatic. This isn't melodrama, Liam said. This is me refusing to be treated like this. This is me standing up and saying that what you're doing is wrong. You don't get to hide behind the excuse of doing your job or keeping it real. You're just being mean for the sake of being mean. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. You want to know what people at home are really thinking? Liam continued. They're thinking that you should be ashamed of yourself. They're thinking that you owe me an apology. They're thinking that this is exactly what's wrong with certain types of television. The needless cruelty, the manufactured drama, the complete lack of respect. Denise opened her mouth to respond, but Liam held up a hand. I'm not finished, he said. You asked me about getting older. Yes, I'm getting older. We all are. That's what happens when you're fortunate enough to live a long life. You asked me about my career choices. I choose roles that challenge me, that I find interesting, that I think audiences will enjoy. And you asked me about my personal life, about my late wife, and that is where you crossed a line that should never be crossed. His voice broke slightly on those last words, and you could see the emotion in his face. The audience was clearly moved. Several women were wiping their eyes. Even the cameraman looked uncomfortable. That loss, Liam said, composing himself, is the most painful thing I've ever experienced. It's something I carry with me every single day. And you thought it was appropriate to use it as fodder for your talk show, to get a reaction, to create a moment. Liam, Denise started, but she seemed to have lost all her earlier confidence. Well, you got your moment, Liam said, but not the one you wanted. Because I'm not going to sit here and let you bully me. I'm not going to pretend that this is normal or acceptable. And I'm certainly not going to stay here and continue this interview. He set the microphone down on the coffee table in front of him with a gentle but deliberate motion. Janet stood up as well. Liam, on behalf of the show, I want to apologize. This isn't how we normally conduct ourselves. I appreciate that, Janet, Liam said with a small nod. But I think it's time for me to go. Nadia also stood, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Liam. You didn't deserve any of that. Thank you, Nadia, he said kindly. Kay reached out and touched his arm as he moved past her. You're absolutely right to leave. I'm disgusted by what just happened. I appreciate your support, Liam said to her. He turned to walk off the set, and that's when Denise finally seemed to realize the gravity of what had just happened. Wait, Liam, please, she called after him. Can we just talk about this? He stopped and turned back to face her one last time. No, Denise, we can't. Because you don't want to talk. You want to perform. You want to provoke. You want to create controversy. And I'm not interested in being part of that. I was just doing what we always do on this show, Denise said. But her voice was small now, defensive. Then, maybe, you need to think about what you always do on this show, Liam replied. Because if this is standard practice, then you're doing something very wrong. The audience burst into applause again, louder this time, with several people standing. Liam gave them a small, appreciative nod, and then he walked off the stage. The camera caught Denise's face as she watched him go. She looked stunned, like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The other panelists were all looking at her with varying expressions of disappointment and anger. Well, Janet said into the awkward silence, I think we all know who was in the wrong there. Absolutely, Kay agreed. That was painful to watch. Nadia was still wiping her eyes. How could you do that to him, Denise? How could you bring up his wife like that? I didn't think he'd be so sensitive about it, Denise said weakly. Sensitive? Janet's voice was sharp. His wife died tragically. Of course he's sensitive about it. Anyone would. What you did was cruel and unnecessary. I was just trying to have a real conversation, Denise repeated. But no one was buying it anymore. No, Kay said firmly. You were trying to make yourself look edgy and controversial, and instead, you just made yourself look terrible. The producer's voice could be heard off camera, telling them to go to a commercial break. The audience was still buzzing, people talking to each other, clearly shocked by what they'd just witnessed. As the cameras cut away, you could see Denise sitting there, surrounded by her fellow panelists, all of whom were looking at her with disappointment. She had wanted to create a memorable television moment, and she had succeeded. Just not in the way she'd intended. Backstage, Liam was already gathering his things. Members of the production crew were apologizing to him, telling him they had no idea Denise was going to go that route with the interview. He was gracious with all of them, thanking them for their kindness, but making it clear he wouldn't be returning to finish the segment. His publicist was on the phone, already dealing with the fallout, but Liam seemed calm, resolved. He'd made his stand, said what needed to be said, and now he was leaving with his dignity intact. Meanwhile, back on the set, the other Loose Women panelists were having a heated discussion with Denise during the commercial break. You need to apologize when we come back on air, Janet was saying. Apologize to who? Denise asked. He's gone. To the audience, then? Kay insisted. You need to acknowledge that you went too far. I don't know if I did go too far, Denise said, but she sounded uncertain. Are you serious right now? Nadia asked, her voice rising. You absolutely went too far. You went way too far. You attacked a man who came here in good faith. You brought up his dead wife. And you did it all for what? For ratings? For attention? I was trying to make good television, Denise said. That wasn't good television, Janet said flatly. That was car crash television, and you were the one driving the car. The floor manager gave them a 30-second warning. The panelists took their seats again, but the atmosphere was completely different now. The easy camaraderie that usually existed between them was gone, replaced by tension and anger. When they came back from commercial, the empty seat where Liam had been sitting was painfully obvious. The audience was still restless, people whispering and pointing at the vacant spot on the sofa. Kay spoke first. Well, as you all saw, Liam Neeson has left the building, and I think we all understand why. Janet nodded. It's not often that we see a guest walk out, but in this case, I completely support his decision. Nadia added, he was put in an impossible situation. He came here to talk about his work, and instead he was subjected to a series of inappropriate questions. All three women were pointedly not looking at Denise, who sat there with her arms crossed, her face set in a stubborn expression. Does anyone want to add anything? Kay asked, turning to look directly at Denise. The silence stretched out. The audience was watching intently. The cameras were rolling. This was the moment where Denise could have salvaged something from the disaster, where she could have shown some humility, some self-awareness. But instead, she just shrugged. I stand by what I did. If he couldn't handle a few tough questions, that's on him. The audience erupted in boos. Not just a few scattered boos, but a wave of them, loud and sustained. People were shouting their disapproval, some even standing up to make their displeasure known. Janet looked shocked. "Denise, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," Denise said, raising her voice to be heard over the audience reaction. "I'm not going to apologize for doing my job." "That wasn't your job," Kay said, and she sounded genuinely angry now. "Your job is to conduct interviews, not to drive guests away." "He was being oversensitive," Denise insisted. "No," Nadia said, and her voice was shaking. "He was being human. He was being a person who has experienced loss and grief, and you used that against him. You weaponized his pain for entertainment. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just cruelty." The audience applauded loudly at Nadia's words. Signs of support were being held up by audience members. One woman had even written Team Liam on a piece of paper and was waving it at the cameras. "I think we need to move on to our next segment," the floor manager said, trying to restore some order. But the damage was done. The show continued, but everyone could tell that something had fundamentally shifted. The energy was wrong. The panelists were barely speaking to Denise. The audience was hostile. What should have been a fun, engaging talk show had turned into something ugly and uncomfortable. Throughout the rest of the episode, social media was exploding. People who had been watching live were sharing clips, writing posts, expressing their outrage at how Liam had been treated. His name was trending worldwide within minutes. Videos of the walkout were being viewed millions of times, but through it all, Denise remained defiant. When her fellow panelists tried to discuss what had happened during subsequent commercial breaks, she refused to engage. She kept insisting that she'd done nothing wrong, that everyone was overreacting, that this was just typical celebrity entitlement. "How can you not see it?" Janet asked her at one point. "How can you not understand what you did wrong?" "Because I don't think I did anything wrong," Denise said. "I asked questions. He didn't like them. He left. End of story." "It's not end of story," Kay said. "This is going to follow you, Denise. This is going to follow all of us. We're all going to be associated with what happened here today." "Then maybe you should have backed me up instead of siding with him," Denise shot back. "Back you up?" Nadia looked incredulous. "Back you up in what? In being cruel? In being disrespectful? In crossing every professional boundary that exists? Why would we do that?" But Denise had no answer. Or if she did, she wasn't sharing it. She just sat there, isolated from her colleagues, alienated from the audience, stubbornly refusing to admit that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. As the show finally limped to its conclusion, it was clear to everyone watching that something had broken that couldn't be easily fixed. The trust between the panelists had been damaged. The show's reputation had taken a serious hit, and all because one person had decided that being provocative was more important than being decent. In the final moments before they signed off, Kay made one last attempt at damage control. "We want to say to Liam Neeson, if you're watching, that we respect you and we're sorry for how things went today." Janet and Nadia both nodded in agreement. "We hope you know that the behavior you experienced doesn't represent who we are as a show," Janet added. But even as they said these words, Denise sat silent, unrepentant, her arms still crossed, her expression still defiant. And that image of her sitting there while her colleagues apologized around her became just as viral as the video of Liam walking out. Because in the end, that's what people would remember about this day. Not the film Liam had come to promote, not whatever other segments had been planned for the show. They would remember the moment when a respected actor stood up for himself against someone who had forgotten that being a good interviewer means treating your guests with respect and dignity. They would remember how 3 women tried to make things right while one woman refused to admit she'd been wrong. They would remember the audience booing, the panelists arguing, the uncomfortable silences, and the heated exchanges. But most of all, they would remember Liam Neeson, carefully removing his microphone, standing up with quiet dignity, and walking away from a situation that had become untenable. Not with anger or drama or a big scene, but simply by refusing to participate any longer in something that had become disrespectful and hurtful. It was a masterclass in maintaining your composure under pressure, in knowing when to disengage, in standing up for yourself without losing your temper or stooping to the level of the person attacking you, and in showing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away.